I think we probably should not wait more than this. So let's go on and start discussing the sukuk. Uh, in fact, the idea of sukuk is one of the major idea in Islamic finance. It comes simply next to Islamic banks. It is very important, and since it started at the beginning of the new century, it really spread, and that it takes, as you may notice from this slide here, it's the next largest form of investment in Islamic finance. It comes next to the Islamic banks. This information is a little old, from 2021. So we have now definitely we have more than $1 trillion dollar in sukuk worldwide. And you notice, yani, anyway, it is the next largest form of Islamic finance compared, I mean, next to the banks, and all others come much smaller than that, with a big difference. So we want to discuss the objective first of this is to understand what is sukuk. You will find on the internet several articles titled Demystifying Sukuk. In fact, there is no mystery in sukuk at all. We have in the market normally two basic kinds of financial instruments or financial properties that people invest in. We are talking about the real stock market, not in the futures or the imaginary or virtual markets, just the real market. You have basically two kinds: shares or stocks of companies that are registered, and you have bonds issued either by corporations or by government. Bonds are debt instruments, represent debts only. Shares are normally risky, and this is why most laws and most supervisory authorities in the finance system in almost all countries prevent banks from investing in shares. And in most of the times, the only way that a bank may own shares, that's in most countries, probably Germany is the only exception. In the only way where a bank may own shares is as a result of a settlement with a customer who has difficulty in payment and goes bankrupt or anything like that. And then the bank may have to liquidate the collateral, and the collateral may be shares of other companies. So these collateral, most laws also require banks, if they happen to own shares as a result of collateral or any other reason, they are required to liquidate them within a period of time, usually does not exceed 2 months. So when Islamic banks came in the mid 70s and then spread in the 80s, there was a question that was very important. What tools of managing the liquidity do we have available? We cannot invest in bonds because bonds are debt, and any increment in debt is haram. And then investment in an instrument that generate return over debt is, of course, haram also. And we are prevented from investing in shares. So we have, and the Islamic banks actually had difficulty in managing their liquidity. Management of liquidity means that it is normal that banks, because they deal always with money, that they may have sometimes some money that they don't have use for it, and sometimes they are short on money, that they need some more money. This is the meaning of management of liquidity. So the conventional banks use especially government bonds and sometimes high rated corporate bonds. They use them as a tool for managing their liquidity. They buy when they have excess liquid, excess cash, they buy bonds, and when they have a shortage of cash, they sell these bonds. And they are usually, I mean, in the market, easily sellable and also boatable. So this is the main thing, really, that the main drive before, or the main drive behind the creation of sukuk. Um, Now, of course, in Sharia, we notice that Islamic finance is always based on the real market. So when you talk about based on the real market, there ought to be real asset that you buy and sell on murabaha, or you buy and lease on ijara, or you buy and make it as capital in a company, in partnership with another company, and so on. So always there must be an asset. Now debt does not fit as a good instrument for managing liquidity, because you cannot earn through the transfer of debt from one person to another, from one owner to another. That does not generate any added value, and accordingly, you cannot earn from it. So the presence of sukuk came as a result of this need, essentially and basically. Um, where do they start from? They started from writings that came in the early 1990s about potentiality of issuance of uh, financial instruments that represent uh, rented real estate or rented assets in general. So when you have a rented asset, can you uh, still sell that asset to another owner, and then the other owner will start collecting the rent from the moment this other owner becomes the owner onward? Yes, of course, you can sell the asset while it is rented without disturbing the relationship with the lessee. And this is where the idea of sukuk came from. There was a book which started this idea, and it happened that I was the writer of that book. It's a small book, about 120 pages only, and it was issued by, or rather published by, the Islamic Development Bank. I wrote it when I was there as a research officer in the Islamic Development Bank. The book was published for the first time in 1995, and the first sukuk came in Bahrain in the year 2003, based on the ideas that came in that book. Anyway, meanwhile, also in the early 2000s, the not the OIC, sorry, the AWOFI, Auditing and Accounting Organization of Islamic Financial Institutions, adopted the idea of sukuk also, and tried to expand on it also. And the OIC Fiqh Academy approved the idea in principle in the year 2000, and then it gave some more details and conditions in it in the year 2004. Uh, so really the idea of sukuk then became well known and practiced, and then that allowed really for uh, expansion of issuance and trade of the sukuk. So the if we define then sukuk to see what are the sukuk? They are representation of assets in tradable documents, tradable securities. It is called a security in the finance market, so we call it security. Any asset that is that generate any income uh, and can be really represented in a document and be traded in the market. The simplest form, let's take the title of an apartment. If I own an apartment in anywhere in the world, and the government issues me a title for this apartment, uh, can I sell this title or this apartment actually to another person? And by selling the apartment, I will have to hand over this title, and maybe, if the law allows, just sign on the back that I transfer the ownership of this title to another person. For real estate, now government regulations do not allow that kind of endorsement. But for cars, for instance, if a car is rented to another person for say for 2 years, and the rent is paid regularly every month. The title of the car in the United States is called the registration of the car. This registration can be signed on the back of it to another owner, and then the other owner becomes the owner legally, and he takes this document and record it in the this Department of Registration of Vehicles. He would register it there and start collecting the rent from that moment onward. The moment I endorse it to him, and it's sufficient that I sign on the back of that registration, and he can perform the recording with the government office of the motor vehicle on his own without me even interfering or going there. So that is the idea of sukuk. The word sukuk came from the word, it's plural actually, of the word sak. And the word sak is an Arabic word that came in ancient Arabic dictionaries. But apparently, again, according to these dictionaries, the origin of the word is Persian, is not from Arabic, it's from Persia. Now, there are words that are even mentioned in the Quran, that like the word sirat, ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. This word sirat, the language specialists say that its origin is not Arabic, although it was Arabized rather, for a long time before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and before the revelation of the Quran, and it came in the Quran. The word sukuk, also the root of that word again although it is not Arabic originally, it is also mentioned in the Quran. The Quran says about the wife of the Prophet Ibrahim, فَصَكَّتْ وَجَهَهَا. Sakkat wajaha means that she kind of controlled the muscles, contract the muscles of her face, contracted them. So this is the sak means I think that is solid, strong, stand as something good evidence in that sense. So it has all these meanings, and even in many countries, the document of marriage is called sak az-zawaj. In Syria, for instance, and in Saudi Arabia, and so on, the marriage document that confirm that a person is a man is married to a woman. It's not a person to a person. It's definitely a man to a woman. In Islam, that's the only way of marriage. So a man to a woman, and this is called sak az-zawaj. Also, in many countries, it is called the real estate title is called sak al-milkiya, sak al-tamalluk, or sak al-milk. So the word sak is used in Arabic, and it means basically document, or a strong document, a document that has a full meaning in that sense. So that's where the word come from. The awofi has a definition. Probably let's go to that definition first of awofi and come back to this uh, here. Okay, awofi defines sukuk as certificates of equal value representing undivided shares in the ownership, notice, ownership of real assets, could be usufructs also, or a service. I may own, for instance, like service, I may own the uh, 10 units of education in a school of medicine in the University of Ottawa. And this 10 unit that I own, they are represented by a certificate, by a piece of paper or a document, even it may be a document on the computer, a digital document, and that document represent my ownership of this service, the service of 10 credit unit in the medical school in the university, in the medical school of the University of Ottawa, for instance, or anything similar to that. So this is what is the sukuk. It may represent ownership of a car, or it may represent 1% of the ownership of 300 cars that are rented by a car rental uh, company. And let's to make it easy, a long-term car rental company, not that it rents by week or day, it rents by years, and these cars are rented for longer term, 3 to 5 years or more or less. So this is when I combined all these 300 cars together and say this document represent 1% of that, and this is what AOFI means by saying equal shares, because if I issue 100 sukuk for this ownership of 300 cars, all these sukuk will be equal, each one to each other. So this is the meaning of equal value, representing not money, but rather representing shares in the ownership of, so they are equal, They have equal value, of course. Each stock is like any other stock, but they represent all equal shares in the ownership. In this example, all the 100 shares are equal one to the other, and they all represent each one of them 1% of the ownership of these 300 cars combined together. And these 300 cars are committed to a lease contract with users, with lessees, different lessees, and there is a management that manages them. So this is the idea of representing either real assets or service, or it could be usufruct. Like, for instance, if a company owns the usability of a high rise for 10 years, and it buys this from the owner of the high rise for 10 years, the usability of it, and all this high rise is rented to different offices and different the housing apartments, etc. So these and the company manages them. It can issue sukuk representing the usufruct for 10 years of this high rise. And this sukuk, it can issue, say, 1,000 sukuk in the market or 1,000,000 sukuk in the market. Each one will have equal value to the other, and all of them together, each one of them represent, if they are 1,000,000 share, represent 1/1,000,000 of the usufruct of this high rise for 10 years. Of course, with all this specification, we are talking about a specific kind of usufruct. This is where it may represent usufruct or service, or it may represent, like the example of 300 cars, represent the real assets. Now, sukuk need not to be only based on ijara. They can be based on kind of musharaka. But let's see, when it is musharaka, what is the difference between sukuk and shares? They'll be exactly the same. There's no difference really between them. But can we introduce a difference by redefining the share, or let's say two kinds of share, and say that the sukuk represent one of these kinds? Now, in laws in many countries, most countries, and I suppose Canada and United States is part of that, yes, included, and most likely also Canada and UK are included. So we have uh, we have here the law allows corporations to issue temporary shares. So shares that will be liquidated within 5 years. So you share with us for 5 years, and your rights are exactly like any other shareholder. It could be with voting or without voting. Shares without voting are known in the law also, which will be like the fund of Rabbul Mal in Mudaraba, because Rabbul Mal in Mudaraba does not vote in the business. So here, sukuk holders could be a kind of mudaraba, or could be a kind of musharaka also for a temporary period. So to make it like what the Awofi says here, uh, or in the ownership of the assets of a particular project or special investment activity. So if a company has a particular project and it wants to finance it, and this particular project is only for 5 years, we can finance it by issuing sukuk. That will be like shares exactly in this particular project, but usually shares are permanent, although the law allows issuing temporary shares. But here, the sukuk are essentially an investment tool, and as an investment tool, then it is temporary. So for that special project, so this is kind of um, يعني legal, or say call it artificial also, distinction between shares and musharaka sukuk. In other words, I want to say that sukuk may be issued on the basis of ijara, and it gives you revenue. uh, and ijara could be ijara of usufruct, or representing usufruct or services, or leased real estate. They could be issued on the basis of mudaraba, then they become like non-voting shares, but with the idea of being temporary, that are not really like all other shares in the company permanent. And if you want to liquidate it, you only go to the market and sell your share. Whereas in Mudaraba, there is a process of liquidating them at the end of the period, or periodically, say for 5 years. Each year we liquidate 1/5 of these sukuk. And could be musharaka, and the difference between musharaka sukuk and Mudaraba sukuk is only really the voting right. If they are musharaka sukuk, then they have voting right. If they are mudaraba sukuk, they don't have voting right. So sukuk can be issued then not only on the basis of lease contract, they can be also issued on the basis of mudaraba contract or musharaka contract. And we will go into some more details later. So here, the idea of sukuk is that these instruments are tradable in the market while they are Sharia compliant. And notice, if they are ijara sukuk, they give you a fixed return, because essentially in ijara, the return is fixed, and at least is fixed for the first period, and it can be later increased or decreased, or be variable on the basis of another index. But it must be known all the time at the beginning of each rental period. So if the rental period is 1 year renewable for 5 years or for 10 years, then we are talking about 1 year rental period. At the end of each year, the rent must, at the beginning of each year, the rent must be known. So any adjustment, if you want to make it, you can only make it for a future period, not for the period that has already started. Once a period starts, then the rent becomes a debt on the lessee, and the debt cannot be changed. So it can be changed earlier. So the idea of sukuk is then, here we have uh, a security, a financial security that is Sharia compliant. It gives you fixed return, and at the same time, it is tradable in the market. So that is the beauty of the idea. So in other words, we invented a full alternative of the bond, but it is related to the real market, You can issue any kind of bonds and in any quantity, depending on the market. A corporation may borrow from the market from 100 to 10 million or to 10 billion. Depends on its circumstances, its situation, its power, etc. A government may does the same thing, whereas sukuk can only be issued for a real thing, real assets, or real uh, owned usufruct, or real services that really are producible by the company. And so this is sukuk relate all the time to the real market, unlike bonds that are pure debt and do not relate to the real market at all. It's they have their own market, the market of loanable funds. So that's not what we deal with it. So here, uh, why do we need this kind of securities? Because there is demand for it, because Islam offers guidelines for ethical economic system. We cannot issue sukuk for anything that is not ethical, and we cannot issue sukuk for anything that is not, again, real. You cannot issue sukuk for virtual property. It must be a real property. And real property includes also usufruct and services. So could be either way. And then uh, it is it becomes really part of the Islamic financial practice, because it relates to our religion. We should be free and able to practice our religion wherever we are, in the financial market and in the street and also in the home. So all this is part of our freedom. There was, in fact, when the sukuk started and the writing came, and really this sukuk is an amazing example that how thinking can create realities that are very useful. So there was thinking, writing on the issue of ijara and representing ijara by sukuk. In fact, my book was called Sanadat al-Ijara, was written in Arabic. It was called Sanadat al-Ijara. Then in the meeting of the OIC Fiqh Academy, when I presented a paper on this Sanadat al-Ijara, and Sanadat al-Ijara means Ijara bonds. One of the ulama who were present suggested, why don't we call it Sukuk al-Ijara instead of Sanadat al-Ijara? And I, as the paper presenter and the paper writer, which that paper was published in the proceedings of the OIC Fiqh Academy. So myself, of course, agreed with this word and loved it. So the word sukuk really started from that meeting of the OIC Fiqh Academy in the year 2000, and the meeting was held in Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. There was a dire need for Islamic securities that are safe, in a sense, similar to bonds. And this came as a result of that. They can be used for financing big projects, financing them from the market. And that happened also, the experience of Sukuk. You can finance big hospitals, you can finance railways, you can finance construction of roads, highways, you can finance big projects. One of the examples is the the Emirates airline financed the purchase of 10 big airplanes through issuing sukuk also. So all these kind of big project financing, when you want to finance them from the market, you can finance them through issuing sukuk. And of course, that create a secondary market for sukuk. And there is now secondary market for sukuk in most countries in the Middle East and in some European countries, including UK. It is also financing from outside the budget because in Ijara Sukuk, when you issue Sukuk to finance, say, Emirates Airline, it doesn't own, and the value of the 10 airplane that it financed through issuing Sukuk do not appear, or the value does not appear on its balance sheet, because all it pays is yearly rent to the sukuk holders, and the balance sheet does not show that it owns them, and actually it does not own them because the sukuk holders own them. And of course that enhances the capital market. Now, the Now, again, for when we deal with the with the capital market, the we do not look at any security on its own. We only look at what does it represent. What matters is what the security stands for. If it stands for a debt, a commercial paper, or an annuity, or a bond. All these, we treat them as debt and we apply the rules of debt on them. If it represents ownership in a project, and this project is a permissible project, a halal project, like producing computers or home appliances or anything that is permissible, then we say, okay, this it is halal to buy part of this project. If it is if the project is a bank, and the main line of business of the bank is borrowing and lending on interest, then the main line of this kind of corporation is not permissible, and accordingly, it is not permissible to own a share in it, and so on and so forth. Uh, so the sukuk definitely are tradable, and it doesn't make sense really to talk about non-tradable sukuk. I would make a little reservation on this statement because there may be some non-financial benefits from non-negotiable sukuk. For instance, if I want a commercial paper that represents a debt on a company, if I want this commercial paper to be really secured with a good collateral and good recording, I may like to record it in the Commission of Security and Exchange, and especially when I issue several commercial papers to several people together. So to give them more assurance, I may register this commercial paper with the Security and Exchange, not for the purpose of trading it, because it is marked not tradable, because you cannot trade debts from Sharia point of view. So if I issue such commercial papers, I mark them as non-tradable, but I may record them with the Security and Exchange Commission in the country just to give them more strength toward the people who will own it. And of course, they cannot sell them. They have to wait until maturity and they collect from me, from the corporation that issued them. They collect the amount that is represented by them because they are pure debt. So, in a sense, tradability is very important for securities that are in the market, but there are in the market, or there may exist in the capital market, some securities that are not tradable, and they could be Sharia compliant or they could be non-Sharia compliant. So we can imagine having such securities that are not tradable, although this is rare. It doesn't much benefit the market because tradability is a major characteristics of the capital market, of the finance markets. So here the point, sukuk that represent that are based on ijara contract or based on mudaraba contract or on musharaka contract, these are definitely tradable because they represent real assets that generate return. And of course, as you notice, the return in Musharaka is not pre-known, and the return in Mudaraba is not pre-known, but the return in Ijara is always pre-known. At least it is pre-known for the period of Ijara. If you set it as the period of Ijara for 5 years, then it must be known for the whole 5 years. You may set it for 1 quarter renewable up to 5 years, and then you can reset the amount any way you like, you agree on, the two parties agree on, at the beginning of each quarter. Each renewal, at the beginning of each renewal, you can set the price. But anyway, it must be known at the beginning of each rental period. Now, of course, sukuk will have periodical income. This income is pre-known usually in ijara sukuk, but it is not pre-known in the mudaraba and musharaka sukuk. They are liquid in the market. You can sell them in the market anytime, and it's easy to sell them. Although nowadays, because the market is not yet satisfied with the amount or quantity, the total value of sukuk that are in the market is still hungry for more sukuk everywhere in the world, actually. So the buying sukuk is kind of difficult, whereas selling sukuk is very easy and very simple. You may not find in the secondary market sukuk available for sale, but you find, for buy. You may not find them available for buy, but there are many that are available. uh, I mean, you can sell them at any time because there are many buyers that are not finding their orders being fulfilled. So you can sell them easily, but it's not easy to buy them because there is not much offer in the market of sukuk. And all experts say that the market still need probably 4 5 times or more of the existing sukuk nowadays in the market. And this has been the situation since the year 2003 or 2004. So for the last 2 decades, uh, definitely, yes, the market is not yet completely fulfilled with the quantity of sukuk that is available. And the sukuk market is definitely expanding everywhere in the world. Okay. Uh, uh, that's basically really what is about sukuk. Here, when you issue sukuk in a different currency, of course, you bear the risk of currency. Can you issue sukuk that represent debt? Well, if you issue them, they are definitely not tradable. They will have to fall under the rule of hawala of debt and so on. So these are issues that we discussed before, and we don't need to repeat them. Uh, Assets that can be securitized, fixed physical assets, goods or inventory. Can you securitize inventory? Yes, in fact, I have a paper which is published in one of the most respected journals of Islamic economics. It's the journal of King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah of Islamic Economics, under the title of Inventory Certificates. These are really inventory sukuk. They represent inventory, say a big company that uses a lot of inventory, especially that its inventory may be seasonal. Like Nestle, for instance, it uses a lot of cereal. So it needs to buy cereal for huge amounts. These cereals can be bought by the sukuk holders, of course, with agency, with a company that represent them, a trustee that represent them. They buy the inventory and they authorize the company, Nestle company, to withdraw from this inventory and replenish again with authorization on wakala basis. And each period, the master agreement will agree on the pricing of the withdrawal when they withdraw from the inventory, and of course the pricing for the replenishment depend on the market, on market prices of these products. So they can be at all time, the sukuk will be representing the inventory, and quarterly, for instance, the company will distribute, or the trustee will distribute the profit that is generated by the company withdrawing according to the master agreement part of this this inventory. So it can work inshallah in a good way, and that definitely it works, and it can be practiced and done. Usufruct also can be represented. Services can be represented as the examples I gave, or a composite of assets can also be represented. Of course, there are assets that cannot be securitized, like the right to a cash flow, like a pension. You cannot securitize a pension, it's a cash flow. Units of a murabaha fund, because murabaha fund, in murabaha, if you create a murabaha fund, it will always have either cash or cash and debt, nothing else, debts and cash. Because the murabaha contract, during which We own the commodity, but only for 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 1 hour, and we deliver it to the customer. We buy goods and sell them to the customer. And when we buy them on request of the customer anyway. So when you look at the fund at any moment of time, the murabaha contract are fulfilled, so the amount in them become debt, or we have cash that we waiting to be used for murabaha. So you cannot really securitize or trade such unit. Cash assets, gold, silver, deposits in banks cannot be securitized. So the certificate of deposit is cash. The debts of credit cards are debts. Certificate of deposit, sorry, yani it's a debt on the bank. So all these cannot be securitized. So we cannot securitize the credit card balances. Indices cannot be securitized. Why? Not because they are cash or debt, but for another reason, because they are nothing. There is nothing. They represent nothing here because of the lack of realism. Same thing for options or virtual assets. All these cannot be securitized because they are nothing. They are not assets that generate return, or they are not real asset to begin with at all. Uh, of course, there are different kinds of sukuk. From especially the most important is from the point of view of the contract on which the sukuk is based, as we discussed it. But of course, you can say sukuk can be issued by government, so you have sovereign sukuk and you have corporate sukuk. We have also international sukuk by actually the World Bank issued also some sukuk. So it is could be international sukuk. Development Bank in Jeddah is an international organization, and it does issue sukuk, and so these sukuk are international sukuk. So this is from the point of view of the issuer, could be corporate, sovereign, or international bodies. From the point of view of variability, there are variable sukuk like mudaraba sukuk or murabaha sukuk, and there are ijara sukuk also that can be periodically variable at the beginning of each period. And most sukuk anyway that are ijara based are fixed sukuk, fixed return sukuk, and so on. So you can look at sukuk from all these angles. We don't want to waste much time in this. Uh, Now, some of the examples of sukuk are really interesting. For instance, in Jordan, they issued a law, and that was really before the idea of sukuk, but it was not really implemented until after the idea of sukuk, until the new century. What happened? It was at the beginning so controversial until it became well established by the OIC Fiqh Academy and approved by the OIC Fiqh Academy. Now, the law that was issued in Jordan was really interesting. It gives you a sukuk with, or not sukuk really, they call them mudaraba bonds, mudaraba bonds with guaranteed principal. Now, the argument, you can in fact guarantee principal and guarantee even return if you issue it in the appropriate Sharia compliant manner. How it is, the idea in Jordan is a country, of course, a land whose population is Muslim for 1500 years. And for all this period, this many Muslims have created over time many awqaf and make them waqf. And the waqf, most of the waqf used to be agricultural land or buildings, but with time, with the expansion of cities, this agricultural awqaf became part of the city and became residential and gained a lot higher value. But it is only a land. How can we construct residences or commercial properties on these lands? We need funding. To fund it, the law came to say that the Awqaf supervisor, which was the Ministry of Awqaf, as supervisor really, may issue mudaraba bonds, and they call them mudaraba bonds, to the public, and the Ministry of Finance guarantees the principal of these mudaraba bonds. The idea came that the Ministry of Finance is very different from the Waqf. The Waqf is not owned by the government, and the Ministry of Finance represents the government and its national budget. But the properties of Awqaf are not owned even by the Ministry of Awqaf itself. The Ministry of Awqaf is only a manager, a supervisor of these properties. The properties of Awqaf are owned by their own objectives, whatever the people assign them for. So they are not owned by the government, not by the Ministry of Awqaf, nor by the government itself. So the law said that as a stranger, as a different party, not related at all to the issue of these lands, awqaf lands, and relation in its relation with the purchaser of these mudaraba bonds to construct buildings on these lands. So the Ministry of Finance, as a stranger, can guarantee the principal as a third party. You remember we discussed earlier the third party guarantee, and we said it is permissible because it is based on the principle that the third party has the full right to do whatever it wants to do with its own properties. So here, the Ministry of Finance, as a third party, guarantees the principal. Even if the Ministry of Awqaf failed in distributing, in returning this capital to you, we guarantee it to you. And that was the idea of these mudaraba or muqarada. Muqarada is simply the other word for mudaraba that were in Jordan. I mentioned the example of the 10 airplanes by the Emirate Airlines was one of the oldest sukuk practices in the early years of the new millennium. And the Nigerian government issued sukuk for road constructions, again, that were really beautiful sukuk, and that are done on that basis. So the example of issuing sukuk is common now and becoming more and more. Of course, let me conclude. Well, let's take the characteristics. Sukuk represent assets. They are by their nature developmental, because you cannot issue them for debt. You can issue them only for real asset. Real asset to be obtained from another party, or real asset to be constructed anew. So they are by definition developmental. They are tradable. market. You can list them in the market and trade them. They can be liquid, they can be sold and purchased at any time. They can be of fixed or variable return. They are less vulnerable to corruption than bonds. The idea here, you cannot issue sukuk unless representing real assets, whereas bonds represent debts only. And you can use the amount of money that you receive for bonds for any purpose, then it's open for abuse. Theoretically, the sukuk are not open for abuse because you can only use it for the assets that for which they are assigned, not for any other thing. And of course, they generate income. But I want to conclude with the idea of uh, potential abuse. Now, there is a statement by one of the classical scholars. I think it was Imam al Ghazali, Muhammad al Ghazali, who died in the Hijra year 505. He has a statement that an abuser can abuse anything. Even the Quran can be abused. You can read the Quran and in order to disturb people from their quietness, from their meditation, from their thinking. You read the Quran for that purpose loudly, simply to disturb them. So anything can be really abused. There is another statement by the late Sheikh Ali Tantawi, who was a great scholar. He died in 1999 and a great reformist in the Muslim thinking. He has many writings that are easy to read, although they are in Arabic, very little of them, I think one or two, are translated into English now. He has a statement that will you bring any best constitution in the world and bad people to implement it, the result will be bad. And you got the worst constitution in the world, have good people, honest people in their implementation, they will do good out of it. So the same thing, sukuk can be abused. So for instance, an Islamic bank may issue sukuk representing the headquarters of the bank. Suppose it's a big building of $50 million, and they issue sukuk for $50 million, telling this property that they have to the sukuk holders and renting it from them back, with buying it back also over a period of, say, 7 years, paying rent during these 7 years, and also purchasing parts of it periodically until they purchase it back all. So sukuk here are issued on the principle of the Ina contract, which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prohibited, and which means really riba. The difference in it is riba, and then you can issue this sukuk again and again and again without having a new building. Each time you do it with the same kind of building and again and again. Yet this will be limited, not like bonds, because bonds you can issue them without limit, depend on the acceptability in the market. Whereas here, again, the acceptability in the market is an issue, but theoretically, you can issue them each, suppose, 7 years once. You cannot issue them again once they are during the period they are owned by the sukuk holders. So you have to wait until you recover them and then issue again. But you can always find another property meanwhile to sell it and buy it back. So you can issue sukuk on the basis of Ina. and that is abuse of sukuk. Unfortunately, yes, there are some abuses of this kind that exist in some Islamic banks, especially what is called in Turkey, for instance, the sukuk, they call them ijara, Sharia compliant certificate, ijara sukuk, for short term, for 3 month ujara sukuk, issued on that basis of INA, which is not really Sharia compliant. And I definitely refuse to invest in this kind of sukuk because actually they are based on riba, and they produce riba, and they are abuse of the idea of sukuk. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And now I finish here, and let's see whom do we have still. We have uh, on this the same two people. We are still only you and me. There are two of you now. Okay, inshallah, you benefit from it, and I hope again the other people who miss attending with us will benefit from it. But anyway, if you have any question, meanwhile, go ahead, please, and ask your question.
Yes, Sister Miriam, you can go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say Jazakallah khair, Professor, for your time and effort in teaching us. We all learned so much, and I made so many notes. So it was very, very valuable knowledge, and thank you so much for teaching us all these months. Barakallahu feek.
Thank you very much. Barakallah. So, Sister Hiba, for the certificates, please draft them and make a good design on them. And you find on the internet many ways of designing it. Make good